prevents us all from killing you and taking what we want.
If you had spoken such insolence to Jabba, he'd have fed you to his menagerie.
Please, speak freely.
Josh from TrimTV, where me and my guests talk about TV series that have ended to see if it's worth your time or should you trim it from your watch list. And we do this in a mostly spoiler-free chat. And on today's episode, we are talking about the sci-fi drama The Book of Boba Fett. And my guest for today is Taz. Hi Taz, how are you doing?
Great in every way, shape, and form.
So what is the Book of Boba Fett about with no major spoilers?
I know that you sit on the throne of your former employer.
Jabba ruled with fear. I intend to rule with respect.
On the sands of Tatooine, bounty hunter Boba Fett and mercenary Fennec Shand navigate the galaxy's underworld and fight for Jabba the Hutt's old territory. So, not like a huge description you can find online about it. So, let's discuss it. We'll save the spoilers for the end. So, minor spoilers only. What are some of the storylines you liked about this?
Well, it's interesting. I think the teaser actually pretty much set up everything that they wanted to do, with one exception. I think the teaser set the fact that these two individuals were on this particular planet. They were fighting I'm not sure what the phrase was in the teaser, but they're fighting things on this particular planet, which is an odd thing to tease and an odd thing to advertise. Star Wars, in the movies at least, was always, a grand scheme thing across the galaxy, across the universe, across planets of all sorts of different, rebel planets or planets allied with the Emperor or this and that and the other. And yet the teaser and the Book of Boba Fett comes down to one planet and, for the most part, one city on that planet. And it puts two people in that particular city to fight the, crime and corruption of a city. So it's sort of like a looking inward type thing, as opposed to oh my God, we're going to have something in that's galaxy wide or broader than that. So
and that was kind of weird for me because wasn't Boba Fett like this? I thought he was like a bounty hunter turned crime lord. Was I mistaken in that?
He was a bounty hunter that could show up anywhere in the galaxy, right? He was always available for hire, and he could show up anywhere to do anything. And yet the premise of this particular show is all of a sudden he's planet bound, and that's an interesting tenet. That's an interesting premise for the show.
Yeah, I think it was just a weird turn of events that he's good in this. He's a good guy. The last time we saw him in the movie, when he gets thrown into the Sarlacc pit, he was kind of a bad guy. So this is a different take on that.
Right.
Not sure if it was a great decision. It was a decision. So what's your favorite, or who's your favorite Hutt?
Who's my favorite Hutt? I like the twins, as perhaps abbreviated as their appearance in this show over the several episodes was. I like the twins because they seemed to be far more realistic. When all was said and done, they still had a certain style, a certain panache, but they were far more realistic. So they didn't play a big part. Yeah, it wasn't. It made it made it clear that Jabba the Hutt was not just a one of, but that there was some lineage and some heritage, so to speak. And I think actually the show didn't use that to the amount of credit that they could have. But yeah, they're my favorite. It's like literally. I don't think this is a spoiler, but to have the little fan when you're being litter carried by take a guess 20 or 30 guys, and it's just have the little fan saying, "Oh my God, why don't you have slaves? The Egyptian slaves with the palm leaves." I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. I would say my favorite Hut is probably Pizza Hut. They were far better than what we saw in this.
You worked for that, didn't you?
So one of the plot lines is they have a spice trade going through Tatooine, and apparently spice is like the illicit space drug, so it's essentially space cocaine. They kind of mention it throughout the series, or not the series, but like the greater overall universe. I thought it was kind of a weird take for a plot line. What did you think of the spice trade stuff?
Well, if you'll let me, I'm going to go all logical on you. And I realize this is all made up, but all right, when you retreat a little bit from thinking you're watching some other science fiction Dune movie, and spice is this or that or the other. Enslaves our people, killing our people, as you hear in the dialogue for the show. It's made in the slave mines of something.
I think it's like
that's
Kessel
not,
or something.
It could be. That's not quite explored. It may be explored in the other parts of this universe. All right. But you make it someplace. It's physically manufactured someplace. And this is me just being a grumpy old geezer. You make it. All right. You know where you're making it. Well, put it on a damn ship and take it off the planet and ship it to wherever you need to be. The fact that you make it someplace and suddenly it has to transit through various cities on the planet or be loaded onto a train to go to someplace else really doesn't make much sense to me at all. That's like a setup. That's like gold through the old west town. That's like whatever valuable cargo that has to be transported by some process that's amenable to crooks. It just didn't make sense.
I get what you're saying with like they're trying to go with this whole Western motif of like the old West but meets space, and you're kind of saying like they have this train robbery scene essentially that goes down early on. And yeah, I totally get what you're saying with like they have spaceships. They could literally just land it wherever they
drop
want
down and pick it up and go. It's like
it's a barren planet. So yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that is kind of just like shoved in there for no reason except to just have a train robbery scene.
Well, there's all sorts of Wild West things. Not to jump onto this theme, but there's all sorts of Wild West themes, the young kids and the riflemen and the Wild West shootouts in the streets and the marshal and I just sometimes felt that the writers were looking for a plot, so they just watched old 1960s TV shows and adapted it into the planet and into this particular show. Those were at least episodic and
I think
gave
they were
you
trying
some clue.
I think they were trying to sort of mimic how The Mandalorian has that like Western aspect. I mean, at heart, The Mandalorian is like almost a spaghetti Western, but in space. So I think they were trying to keep that same motif because at points they're going to merge the worlds. In a small spoiler, The Mandalorian does appear, just as oh, that would be a big spoiler. But yeah, they do end up merging these worlds. So I do think they had to keep sort of like a unified artistic direction.
The latter episodes of the Book of Boba Fett with the Mandalorian were probably some of the more engaging. You know that they were more engaging because you watch them and say, "Wait, what am I watching? The Mandalorian or Boba Fett?" I mean, it became totally blurred.
Episode 5. So this one only has 7 episodes. So episode 5, 6, and 7 almost felt like it was the Mandalorian show, and there was a noticeable, like, things got more interesting. Like, you weren't like, oh my god, how long is this one? You're like, oh, okay, I could watch this. And then episode 6, I don't know if you noticed like an uptick in the difference, but that was like out of the Star Wars fandom. That was written by like their number one fan in Dave Filoni, who wrote a bunch of the animated series. I saw a noticeable difference in episode 6. I think his hands on this entire show, if he would have got his hands on episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, I think we would have had a much stronger storyline.
It could be, but I just felt that there was, well, I felt and I watched that there was there was a shortage of ideas about what to do, and I'll give you a specific example of that without trying to do spoilers. Watching it all the way through to the last episode of this, which was episode 7, right? This is episode 7 of the Book of Boba Fett. So one, logically, entertainment-wise, however you want to parse it, one would think it would end with something on the main character of the show, but it doesn't.
Yeah, at that point we've like basically transitioned from the Book of Boba Fett into like 3 bonus episodes of The Mandalorian, sometimes featuring Boba Fett.
That's right. So Boba Fett is just, I can't even remember the last scene that he was in. There was no crisis set up. There was no future set up. There was no goal that was set up as something to look for or look towards. What are you going to do for your main character, Boba Fett? And it brings me back to what I started with a few minutes ago. Boba Fett's still stuck on this planet. What are his goals? What are his motivations? What does he want to accomplish? He's stuck on this planet. There's stuff to be done. You got to fight against the syndicate. You got to fight against the spice trade. You got to do this and that and the other. But whatever was a galaxy-wide set in which to interact before is now reduced to, his Bacto tank, going to see the mayor in the office, going to see the saloon, and shooting up some guys on the streets.
Yeah, it's just a weird take for them to end the series on like a weird note for the main character, and then have like, I don't know, the last half or last quarter of the episode to be about somebody else.
Right.
And
but there was some good writing. Earlier on, I can't remember which episode, when the mayor says, running a family is quite different and more demanding, implied, than doing anything else that you've done before. I think that was a very prescient statement to make. Yeah, it is. All right. Because the mayor himself is sitting there trying to run a town, dealing with all of the same pressures and problems from this crime syndicate and the various factions in town. And, that was a very, very clever thing to say. And there were a few hints of other good writing when and it came from several places when people were advising Boba Fett that respect is something that you have to generate, is something that you have to cherish, is something that you have to work towards getting. And I think that was almost a little too prescient for their own good, because instead of walking down the street and doing a right arm salute is not quite the same as respect when the various factions in the town will rise up concertedly against you. So there were some hints of good writing, some hints of, I think, the conflicts that could have been explored.
It was almost like they split this into like three stories, and like none of the writers talk to each other.
I think that's a great point.
It was very like noticeably segmented, and I don't think it was edited all too well. This one has a lot of flashbacks and a lot of time where you're like, when are we?
So it's almost like this is the Book of Boba Fett. There's a big history of all of Star Wars, and these are the things that we should remember about Boba Fett. It's a bit presumptuous because the whole 7 episodes don't convey anything of great importance about Boba Fett. Yeah, he settled in to become the mayor or the person in charge of a town, full of this or that and the other, looking after his people, always fighting to protect his people. But he's become a bureaucratic administrator, which is a big change from what he was before.
I think that is a good stopping point for sort of like what the show was about. No major spoilers in there, hopefully. So let's get into the basics of the show. And I know people are like, hey, Trim TV, we only do shows that have been canceled or shows that have ended, but I really don't think this gets a season 2. So maybe I'm just a little ahead of the curve on that. So the Book of Boba Fett is 1 season with 7 episodes that generally run about 45 minutes-ish. They do have some hour-long episodes in there, but it probably averages out to about 45 minutes each episode. And the series aired in 2021. Rotten Tomatoes critics give the Book of Boba Fett a 68% rating, and the fans rating it a little bit lower at 60%. Talk about some of the positives we loved about Boba Fett.
The storm is about to break.
I might be able to help with that.
You know, I liked Boba Fett because he was a grumpy old guy, which is a little odd, but he actually had a few scenes in a few episodes, in a few episodes where you could tell he was grumpy. It's not just, oh yeah, let's fight the bad guys, let's save the universe, let's do this and that and the other. He was basically, why the hell do I have to keep dealing with this stuff?
So I'll just start off by saying the technology they're filming with is just pretty amazing. Everything looks gorgeous. If you notice the backgrounds of stuff, it looks way better than anything we've seen before. And they're using a new technology where they're essentially filming in a warehouse, and the warehouse, all the walls and stuff are covered in video screens. So instead of actors having to look at just green screen stuff, they can see what we're seeing when they're filming it. So they can interact better with props. They can, they have the world in front of them, essentially. And I think that shows. They started that with The Mandalorian. I know you like Star Trek. Star Trek Discovery does that. And it's a beautiful technology.
It is interesting, and it's interesting for a couple of different reasons. How much easier it makes to do something a little bit more sophisticated, but two, how easy it is to incorporate things from past Star Wars venues or shows or whatever into the present one. So let's I can think of a couple particular examples, but let's just go back to maybe a character from the Cantina decades ago in the Star Wars canon. It's very, very easy to put that character in the Cantina in Boba Fett. Spaceships or weapons or all sorts of things. They can all they're almost like Easter eggs. You just go back and capture what they were before and you incorporate them into the latest show. So that's really, really interesting that they're able to do that. Sometimes I think maybe the writers get a little too, we can put an Easter egg in here and let's see if anybody recognizes it. And I saw some of that, but I don't think it distracted from the stories as they were developing or the scenes as they were shown in this particular episode, in this particular series of episodes, excuse me. I will say, however, that the whole thing still feels so local to me. It's like Boba Fett's in his, I forget what they call it, palace or whatever. Then they go to see the mayor. Then they go to the cantina.
I do think a lot of that is some things that happened behind the scene where this was filmed during the middle of COVID. So they were having to do COVID tests every day and limit who was on set and, keep, actors separate. So you don't necessarily get some of the storylines I think we were hoping for just because, they were filming it under such restrictions.
And that could be the explanation. It does have a closed-in feeling of it, but it was all inwards for the most part. Yeah. Instead of having a larger feel that what happens here makes a difference in the big scheme of things. It was all very, very local.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So what's something you liked about it?
I liked it that Boba Fett was a grumpy old guy, saw what his weaknesses were and was back and forth towards, I'm getting soft in my old age and I realize it, and I'm not getting soft in my old age and I'm still going to be a big mean old Boba Fett.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tamara Morrison, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who plays Boba Fett. I liked him as helmetless Boba Fett. I'll definitely get into what I didn't like about him, but I do think overall he plays Boba Fett well.
Well, I think that's interesting, and to cut apart to the Mandalorian. Okay, getting the Mandalorian's helmet off took how many episodes, right? Oh no, we never take our helmet off. Whatever, Boba Fett, his helmet was off more often than I'd care to mention. It's like it wasn't a big thing. It was a tool.
It's not for Boba Fett. It wouldn't be a big thing because that particular we don't take off our helmet rule. This is the way that comes from a super out there religious sect of the Mandalorians. Okay. Yeah. So Mando is part of that, but Boba Fett isn't. So he'll take his helmet off for anyone.
And he'll be in his Speedos in the Bacto tank. I mean, I think that was actually something I liked. It's like, oh my God, people are out there every day busting their butts to fight evil or whatever. And they need some me time. They need some recovery time. They need some medical attention or whatever the Bacto tank did for them. I think the Bacto tank was again an underutilized element. Mando was in it, but then in some of the later episodes, other people were in it as well. So yeah, what is it? Where did it come from? Is there only one? How is it used? I think those were all potentially good story arcs that they didn't quite follow up. Where did he get it in the first place?
Yeah, for it being like, I don't recall another Bacto tank, so like for it being the first time we're essentially seeing this, we probably could have got like a 30-second explainer shot of like what it does, why it works, where it came from,
and why you. That's right, and why you can have you can be physically rejuvenated in it. I think that was the point, but you still have dreams. I mean, that was episodes 1 through 3 or 4. I'm in the Bacto tank. I have to be there to rejuvenate physically, but I still have all these dreams. Well, there's a conflict right there. If you don't want to have the dreams, don't get in the Bacto tank. If you have to get in the Bacto tank, you have to deal with the dreams. But there's a conflict right there that was never really explored. So, but I did like that back to the original challenge question. Boba Fett was real. Couple other people were real. Couple other people. I'm not being a broad inclusive there. I would have to say that not quite so real, or not quite so believable, was Boba Fett's colleague. The lady that in a later episode he brought back to be modded, for lack of a better term. What is Fennec?
Fennec Shand.
There's a whole, and I'm gonna do this, and you can yell at me. There's a whole Spock Kirk thing there that isn't quite worked through. Boba Fett's in charge, but here's the lady with the tactical expertise, the martial arts expertise, the jumping over buildings expertise, all sorts of expertise that apparently he doesn't necessarily possess anymore, and she's just sort of a sidelight.
Yeah, I do think for how good of an actress Ming-Na Wen, is, they didn't really use her. It's almost like they didn't know what to do with the character.
Well, she jumps around on the buildings, parkour, I think you call that. She's an excellent assassin. She's a fairly good strategist, apparently. She's got some of the best lines in the series. Whereas Boba Fett is droll and dour and grouchy.
Half of Boba Fett's lines are like, "I am Boba Fett." That's like
really,
half the
really.
show.
Left for dead on the sands of Tatooine. I am Boba Fett.
I wouldn't have been upset if this was the Book of Fennec Shand. I thought she kind of blew Boba Fett out of the water.
She had a goal, right? I mean, Boba Fett goes through this whole seven series episodes. He doesn't really have a goal. Fight the bad guys. Okay, well that's not an overarching story goal. She had a goal. She was the muscle. She was in fact the only muscle that he had from the beginning. It's like, okay, so if you're going to take Jabba the Hutt's and the other person's place, and you're going to run this city, wouldn't the first thing to be done is to recruit a whole bunch of henchmen, colleagues, muscle, from the very beginning? Instead, you carry on with the two dad bod green body paint guys, and I'm happy for them. I'm happy that there's acting jobs for dad bod guys that are willing to put in green body paint and run around in kilts, basically, and squeal a lot. I mean, I would love to see the casting sheet for that. But two guards brought over from the last corrupt administration is not a group of henchmen that allows you to control the city. Finding the mods, the boys and the girls on the fancy 1950s motor scooters running through the city, and say, oh, well, I'll solve their problem by hiring them and they're going to become my muscles or my watchmen. That doesn't make much sense either. It's just a non sequitur. If you're gonna do this, this is where your goal is to run my people, and I'm gonna make a safe place for of these people in my city. You know what the pressures are going to be. You know what the challenges are going to be. So use your skill, use your expertise, use your understanding. Gather in your colleagues, gather in your muscle, and do that from the beginning instead of saying, oh my God, we're about to be attacked. I'm going to have to reach out to Freetown and get muscle there.
I see what you're saying. Another thing I liked that I thought was well done was the first time he puts on his armor. He steps out of that Bacta tank, I think, and you get a shot starting at the boots, and like it slowly pans up, and it's just a gorgeous shot of them putting on Fett's armor for the first time. So there are some gorgeous shots in this, but yeah, the storylines are suspect.
That reminded me of Tony Stark. If you remember that
very
series,
much so. Yeah.
It's like again, it was a nice sequence. It was nicely done, but it wasn't so original to me. It's like I said, okay, let's put Tony Stark in there, and we'll dress up the Iron Man with all his accoutrements and this and that and the other. So again, it's a borrowing to me that was valuable, but it was valuable not because it was original. It was valuable because it was good someplace else. So they just decided to do it again here.
Well, if they did trademark that shot, Disney owns everything, so they're probably okay. So I have probably like one more positive I wanted to get to. So they do a decent amount of introducing new characters. For the most part, I thought they did a good job. I didn't particularly enjoy the mod squad, but we have space ninjas now, essentially. I thought that was pretty cool. I think they call him Black Kirstan. They introduced a new Wookiee character, and I kind of like him better than Chewbacca. I thought he was a great addition to the cast, so I think we're going to see more of him in some of the upcoming series, so that should be interesting.
Can I make a point here?
Yeah.
So I, for lack of a better term, I call him the Black Wookiee. All right. A mercenary, a bounty hunter, a gladiator. I think the term was used. A warrior for hire. That's all really, really interesting. Except there's one fundamental problem that they didn't touch on. He doesn't talk.
I mean, Chewbacca doesn't really talk either.
Well, that's correct, and in Chewbacca it wasn't that big of a thing because Han Solo could understand him, right? And there are certain people here that by plot could understand him as well. But you have now 3 bounty hunters in the same show: Boba Fett, his colleague Fennec
Shand.
I'm terrible with names. Fennec Shand, and the Wookiee, the Black Wookiee. All right,
and the Mandalorian.
So the Mandalorian who comes in later. All right, but he's not strictly a bounty hunter, right? He is a little bit, but that's been damped down over many episodes. But here's the Wookiee. What a great new perspective to bring in. But he can't talk, not even in subtitles, which appear elsewhere in the show series.
Yeah, that is an interesting take.
Fire in the hole!
So I think we're all ready for the negatives. I certainly have a lot of negatives about this one. So I'll just jump right in. We all know Anakin Skywalker has a sordid history with sand, but like for real, Boba Fett must like fucking hate sand at this point. And I thought it was a failure by the writers to like make that joke, especially Anakin Skywalker hating sand is like such a meme now. Yeah, it was just like you were saying earlier, everything is on this sand planet, and sand gets in everywhere.
I think there was a lot of effort, as you go back to scenes that involve or portray old characters, to put in all the Easter eggs, forgetting that the plot has to move forward. The plot should move forward. There were just so many disconnects, and you just put them there, and you don't seem to take advantage of any knowledge about who they are, what their experience is, and what their expectations are. You're just using them as crutches, and I think the writing and the plot could have done a whole lot better with that.
Okay, yeah, I can see what you're talking about. I think for me, one of my negatives is like I thought it was too much of the Tusken Raider scenes. I wanted this to be more like a space mafia, and I don't know, it just focused too much on his connection with the Tusken Raiders, which, I mean, to a later degree, it pays off somewhat, not very well. Nothing in the series pays off very well. I thought there was just cooler stuff we could have focused on than having, like, an episode or 2 episodes, whatever it was, just on his relationship with the Tusken Raiders.
The choreography was great, though.
Yeah, I was like, another negative, like, we had a fully, like, choreographed dance scene in the middle of the desert. It was very odd, and I get, like, he was doing a tribal ritual. It was an odd choice when you only have 7 episodes, I guess.
Well, there you go. But remember how many of the episodes involved a street fight scene, a la the Old West again. This may seem like a minor negative point, but as the season ends up, you have a grand and glorious Old West fight scene in the streets. And literally, I didn't time it, but wave after wave of attackers after our heroes who are boldly trying to, fight them off. And it could have been 1/5 the time, because you knew something was going to happen in the end, that the situation would be saved. But and here's a very not a very subtle, it's actually a very explicit negative point. It goes on and on and on and on, and every time the scene resets, after all of these people are being shot in the streets, every time the scene resets, there's no bodies in the streets.
Oh yeah, that is true.
I mean, it's just it's like a rewind. Okay, it's like we don't have to make any continuity here. We're just going to do this for as long as we last to get to the end of the episode and make what little plot point that we have to make. It was so obvious to me that it detracted a lot from those particular scenes.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see some of the like continuity issues and pacing issues. I certainly thought it had a bunch of pacing issues. The CGI is like somewhat questionable. I mean, like for the most part, it looks pretty good. But then like 5 minutes later, you just see something and you're like, what the fuck is that? And earlier we were talking about Tamora Morrison's portrayal of Boba Fett, and I made the comment like I like him when he doesn't have the helmet on. And I meant by that is I think his overall character portrayal of Boba Fett was great. They 100% needed to give him a stunt actor to play him anytime he had a helmet on. There were scenes, especially in the train chase, where he's moving, and it does not look pretty. He's very, very stiff. There's a couple fight scenes where you can tell he's not a good choreographed fighter. If he's doing a real like simple fight scene where like 1-2 punch and like you're taking down the bad guy that way, the camera's pretty still. But anytime he has to do any like complicated choreography, we get a real shaky cam. And that's usually because the actor is not that skilled at fight choreography.
That's interesting. I didn't notice that much, mainly because I don't pay that much attention to the choreography on that, because I sort of assume that it's all stunt people. I think he did pretty good overall when he was playing a part, and the part was the grumpy old guy. I'm sorry to come back to that, but the grumpy old guy that's forced into the role of being a bureaucrat. What I did see as a negative is when he's all alone with Fennec, and he can supposedly speak freely. He still had the same evenly modulated tone to his voice. So if you're talking to the person on the street, that you're trying to outshoot, you keep your voice even, and you keep your emotions out of your voice. But if you're talking with your compatriot, wouldn't you vary your voice a little bit? Wouldn't you have ups and downs? Wouldn't you be mad or be happy? Wouldn't there be any sort of emotion there? But it wasn't. It was still the same, emotionless, for lack of a better term, way of talking.
I did think he came off stiff, especially in the earlier episodes.
I mean, in one of the earlier episodes, people are supposed to, the folks, the inhabitants of the city are supposedly coming in to offer tribute. And then there's, of course, somebody that doesn't. And he's whispering, sotto voce, says, what the heck's going on here? And says, instead of saying, what the heck is going on here? Instead of having some, emotion, it's not there.
The matter of tribute.
I'm confused.
He wants you to pay him.
What? I'm the crime lord. He's supposed to pay me.
Shall I kill him?
So it's almost like he was muted the whole time, and I think could have been done a little bit better. That's acting; it's not the physical part of the acting, but and maybe that's what he was told to do. That's actually true for every character in this whole series of episodes. The voices. I mean, about the person that had the most interesting vocal inflections and stories to be told was the mayor's assistant. You've got it. The obsequious little asshole. Excuse my French. But he wasn't overplaying. That was his part, and I wish I'd seen a little bit more of that in all of the other characters.
Yeah, it was a little dry. I do think a lot of times in a lot of the Star Wars series, like even the robots kind of outshine the main characters for dialogue. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure if it's dialogue written for children, because Star Wars is kind of written for children, or is it just Star Wars is known for simple dialogues? But speaking of dialogue, let's talk about Tusken Raiders.
Oh, the Tusken Raiders. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so let's talk about the Tusken Raiders. They do some scenes where it's like essentially space charades, and it's like the most basic charades, and yet they're having like these full-blown conversations, and it was just wild.
Yes, you had charades and ASL essentially, and then cut to a few scenes later, and you're still making grunting noises, but you have captions now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big disconnect of there's just a big language disconnect.
And speaking about like some of the weird things about the Tusken Raiders. So in this series, Disney was like, we had enough. We are changing the name of Boba Fett's starship. They changed it from Slave One to Fire Spray Gunship because I guess Slave One was too controversial of a name. But yet they drop sand people on the Tusken Raiders a few times. I thought that was a bit odd. Sand people is like the most racist thing I've heard in Star Wars. Like I for sure could not talk about the Middle East, and I was like, oh, those sand people. Like what? I just thought that was an odd take to keep that in at this point, but to change the name of his ship was, I just don't understand that whole thought process.
Because gun spray is such a nicer name, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
implying that you're going to be, shooting things. That's such a nicer name.
Yeah, I guess Murder Ship was.
Murder Ship was trademarked or something. But they said it themselves after they stopped the spice train, is what I'm going to call it. There's a bit of dialogue that we thought the Sand People were uncivilized. That's specifically what they say. Probably one of the most honest lines of dialogue in the series. It doesn't make any difference other than the fact that we're going to run the spice train through those lands. And as soon as we get to an appropriate geographical point, we're going to open up the steel blast windows and start shooting. Wow. Gosh, that's a way to appreciate cultures, right? Yeah, there were a whole lot of things that didn't make sense with that. So they stopped the train that wasn't on rails, that looks like it's on rails. The captions that says, well, we don't have modern weaponry. We don't have technologically advanced things, but then they're offloading the train, and my God, the modern weaponry comes off, and they sure know how to use it right away. So, wait, what? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense, that those particular parts. And besides, the solution is, well, we stop the train, and you're going to have to pay protection. You're going to have to pay a toll to get through these lands. Excuse me. All right. So what are the Tuskens going to do with
money?
Credits.
Yeah.
Money. What are they? They don't deal with money, apparently. Or do they? That's unclear. There were a whole lot of non sequiturs in that part of it. But maybe that was just a dream. Right? Mm-hmm. It was unclear how much of that was dream and how much of that was real.
Right. Yeah, there are a bunch of plot holes I think they establish in this one. One of my last negatives was the mod squad. So it's essentially a biker gang, but they ride mopeds, shiny mopeds.
Tiny mopeds.
I did not care for them at all. I don't know. It just... Like, how are you going to be afraid of Boba Fett? Which, I mean, that's another thing where I don't think, people are afraid of him. He implies they are, because at times he's just like, I am Boba Fett, and they start, shaking. He's a good guy in this. But, I'm not scared of him, and I think him having a moped gang definitely doesn't help me, it doesn't improve his street cred, I guess.
They're mods, but the question is, the analogy is, they're like a tattooed gang. Just like it was outrageous to get tattoos earlier. Well, they're mods. Well, why do they have mods? And more importantly, to the fact that they get hired by Boba Fett because, he neglected to get henchmen on his side earlier, so he has to hire these people. Why do they have mods? Does that give them special abilities, special skills? That's never mentioned. Okay, there's one guy with an eyepiece that there's some intimation that he can see better or target things better, but it's never particularly shown.
Yeah, they don't really explore the other characters' mods either.
That's right. So Fennec went to the mod doctor because she had her insides messed up, so she got lots of mods, but that's so she can live. Why are all these people getting mods? Is it better? Is it a sign of gang affiliation? What are the various mods? Most I saw was an eye thing on one person, and the young lady that led them had an arm that was covered up later to decrease the amount of special effects, I guess. But there's never any advantage shown to that. So that was just a whole little non sequitur in the series.
I think you've made your point.
Let's move on to our facts and trivia. So this takes place around 5 years after Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi. So that kind of places it in the timeline for you. Another fact is in Season 5, Episode 19 of Parks and Recreation, Patton Oswalt's character presents his idea for the 7th chapter of the Star Wars saga during his citizen filibuster. What he describes is very close to the opening of Episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. And then, finally, for our fun facts, the story of Boba Fett's time with the Tusken Raiders shares many similarities with a movie called A Man Called Horse, starring Richard Harris. In this film, Harris, a British aristocrat, is captured by indigenous Americans and used as a pack animal for the tribe. He is able to prove his fighting skills in battle, which impressed the chief. He learns to communicate with the natives and eventually became a member of the tribe, and after participating in a painful ceremonial trial. So those are our fun facts for Boba Fett. So, moving on, how would you fix, reboot, or spin off this show? Any thoughts?
You're looking for a job, you're late. Negotiations are terminated.
Well, it does need to be fixed. My first thing would be to actually reduce the length of time for fight scenes or things that don't advance the plot. Second thing I would say is maybe a bit more problematic. Let Mando do Mando's thing. If the show is going to survive on the Book of Boba Fett, make it about Boba Fett. Don't make it about Mando. Trying to milk the successful things about that show and bring them into this show.
Okay. So I think I would fix this. I don't think it's getting a season 2. Boba Fett is just not how they currently have him portrayed. He's not a strong enough or interesting enough character to have his own show. He works best as a side character on The Mandalorian. I think Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec Shand, this probably should have been her solo show. I think by doing that, we would have got a more interesting, a more action-packed, a tighter storyline if it was just the book of Fennec Shand. And I personally think this didn't get good until The Mandalorian appeared. So if you want to fix this, don't watch the first 4 episodes and just watch The Mandalorian plus episode 5, 6, and 7 of this. I think that would fix it a lot. But I do think Fennec Shand gets her own show, probably announced next year.
Lord Fett offers the gift of your leave unmolested.
Apologies and appreciation. The mayor may take it differently, but I shall indeed convey your sentiment.
So let's get into closing out the show. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think this is? Why do you think it is that? I'll give you a first crack at that one.
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, and assuming 10 is awesome and 1 is not so much, I'm going to put this right in the middle at 5. I sort of enjoyed watching it. The more I watched it, though, the more I kept seeing plot holes or missed opportunities or perhaps worst of all, shortcuts. The more I watched it, the more I saw other movies other shows, Wild West shows on TV, A Man Called Horse. My God, at the end, Godzilla, that became a struggle for me.
Okay. This one's a little tough. I think if I was just evaluating episodes 5, 6, 7, or, The Mandalorian part 1, 2, and 3 for this, I think it's probably an 8. But since Boba Fett might be the weakest character in his own show by far, and I think the Boba Fett storylines and episodes actually really bring this one down for me. So I think it's a little better than what you thought. I think it's probably a 6 for me. I think I was looking for more like Space Sopranos, but all I got was like Space Narcos, and then even then it wasn't a great version of Space Narcos. So yeah, I think I'm gonna settle on a 6 for the Book of Boba Fett.
Like a panther. Yes?
So moving on, show recommendations. Do you have any shows that you think are similar to this one, but, better? Or at least on par?
Well, the show that comes immediately to mind is Mandalorian, at least to the extent that it's been produced so far. It's going to be interesting to see, since Boba Fett hijacked some of that plot line, it's going to be interesting to see what The Mandalorian itself does as it continues into production, or where it's going to go.
Okay, so I do think The Mandalorian is probably my recommendation for this. But we'll go with a different one. We'll go with Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the animated series. A lot of things you need to know in this one are from the Clone Wars, and with the Ashoka series coming out soon, that is probably going to be a show you want to catch up on before that. And with that note, thank you to Taz for joining us on this episode where we talked about the Book of Boba Fett.
Nevertheless, we are both honored and delighted by your serendipitous visit. However, I regret to inform you the mayor is indisposed for the rest of the week. And this area here is restricted. No, you're not. Sir, if you would be so. Apologies for the intrusion. Terribly sorry, Your Eminence.